Okay, here we are. We're going through the New Testament in chronological order. And think about what you've done over the last 20 years, your life, the last 20 years, and the kinds of activities and the things that you've accomplished and the things that have happened. And if you're a member of a church, think about the things that your church has done in the last 20 years. What kinds of projects have they done? What kinds of things have they done in the community? Have they sent out any young people into the ministry? Have they brought on any interns? Because the Apostle Paul, we're about 20 years into the spread of the gospel from the day of Pentecost. And the Apostle Paul, he hasn't been into it for all of the 20 years. He's sent out of the church in Antioch. And, maybe that's about, 12 years later, 15 years later, maybe. So the Apostle Paul is starting these churches. The church has been going on for 20 years or so. And Paul and his missionary team have planted all kinds of churches. We said that they've planted, besides this one here in Corinth that we're looking at, another 7 churches that we know of that the Apostle Paul was involved in planting. Imagine that. Imagine your church or one of your church missionaries in the last 15 years or so, planting 7 or 8 churches. Well, that's what the Apostle Paul has done. So this is moving pretty fast, and it's amazing how rapidly the expansion of the world Christian movement is happening when they don't have any texting, they don't have any videos, they don't have any through the New Testament Bible studies, they don't have any planes, they don't have any cars. These guys are going around on foot. They have no communication. So when they go from one town and go to the next town, there's no communication necessarily with the other town. But Paul had set up his own sort of communication network in that he started this sort of circle of churches that he started, and he's picking people up in those churches, and he's bringing them with him to plant new churches and to be involved in the churches that he's planted. And so he's picking them up and he's dropping them off and he's sending them around. And there's actually this communication network that is purely human between them. And so he gets to chapter 7. We call it chapter 7. It wasn't written in chapters. But he says, now to the matters you wrote about, the matters that you wrote about. So somehow he gets the letter. Somebody went to Corinth, or somebody from Corinth went to him. We don't know exactly what it was. And they asked some questions about marriage and sexual sin and living together and sleeping together and being single and being divorced. And, these are the questions that are being asked in the early church. Well, these questions are still being asked in the year, in the 21st century, right? In the first quarter of the 21st century, they're still asking these questions in the church. So now for the matters you wrote about. First one is, it's good for a man to not have sexual relations with a woman. Okay, so they're asking about that. What about sex? What goes on with it? And he said, it's good to not do it. But since sexual immorality is occurring, sexual immorality, that would mean sex outside of the bounds of scriptural marriage. Now, these guys have no basis for scriptural marriage. It's interesting that marriage is something that God has created, and we sort of know that God has created it because it's sort of in the heart and in the soul of everyone. Everyone's, and there are people who have a special gift and people who have, different sort of emotional and mental makeup. But for the most part, we're going to say the vast majority of people have this idea of marriage in their life. And so this idea of marriage is that a man is drawn to a woman and a woman is drawn to a man and they have a family. So this has happened through cultures all throughout history. Nobody's necessarily taught it to them. Maybe they've seen it. Maybe it's what's been being practiced. But marriage is something that has existed in human society since the very beginning. But what is it, and how does it work, and how do you understand it? And what about sex? What about sex without marriage? So, what about that? Because there was a lot of that in Corinth for sure. And he said, but since sexual immorality is occurring, again, outside of the marriage of a man and a woman, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife and each woman with her husband. So get a husband, get a wife, and keep sex within the context of your marriage. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife for her husband. What's it saying? It's saying, that you should, what is that marital duty? I'm assuming that marital duty is having sex. And so if the wife wants sex, the husband should give it to her. If the wife wants sex, if the husband wants sex, the wife should. You say it. Yeah, you got it all messed up. You know what I mean. You know what he means. The wife doesn't have authority over her own body, but yields to her husband. In the same way, the husband doesn't have authority over his own body, but yields to his wife. Don't deprive each other, except for perhaps mutual consent for a time, so that you might devote yourself to prayer, then come again together so that Satan won't tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So he's saying that there are sexual problems in marriages and in the holding back, and the holding back might really create temptation, it might create rebellion, it might create anger, all of that. And he said, don't do that, because the devil will get a hold of you, and then your marriage is going to be messed up, your head's going to be messed up, and your lack of self-control might lead you into other kinds of stuff. So just love one another. Now, he says, I say this as a concession, not as a command. So is this the word of God, or is this Paul giving his opinion? A lot of people would say it's Paul giving his opinion, saying, this is some pretty good advice. And I'm not commanding you this, but I'm saying it as a concession. Is he saying that about what he just said, or is he saying that about what he's going to say? I think maybe what he's going to say. He said, I wish that all of you were just as I am, but each of you has your own gift of God. One has this gift, one has another. Apparently, the Apostle Paul was unmarried. Now, at one point, he was probably married, because in order to be a member of the Sanhedrin, which he was, you needed to be married. So we don't know, did his wife die? Did his wife leave him when he became a believer? We don't know. But he's single, and he's saying, it'd be great, if everybody was single, if everybody was like me. And he says, but now to the unmarried and the widows, I say this, it's good for them to stay unmarried as I do. Paul just told you he's not married. But if they can't control themselves, they should marry, for it's better to marry than to burn with passion. So I guess that sex is a reason to get married. There's much more to it. It's companionship, someone to grow old with, someone to share the burdens with, someone to raise a family with, lots and lots of reasons, but that is one. And then he says, to the married, I give this command, not I, but the Lord. So before he said, this is, my opinion about some of these things, but he said, I think this one is from the Lord. Didn't say, I think it is. He said, it is from the Lord. He said, a wife must not separate from her husband. And some of the ladies are like, you're kidding me. Because some of them wanted to separate from their husbands, because some of them had husbands that were just jerks, and some of them probably had husbands they were just tired of. But if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and her husband must not divorce his wife. So he's saying you must not do it, but if you do, remain unmarried. Remain unmarried, or else be reconciled. Well, to the rest I say, I, not the Lord. It gets confusing. Who's talking here? He said, if any brother has a wife who's not a believer and she's willing to live with him, you must not divorce her. So she's not a believer. Don't divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who's not a believer and he's willing to live with her, then she shouldn't divorce him. She should stay with him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they're holy. Now, it's kind of interesting that, the believer in the family makes sort of the whole family sanctified. I don't know what exactly that means. Think it through. I guess especially for children, young children. But if the unbeliever leaves, let it be so. The brother or sister is not bound in such a circumstance. God's called us to live in peace. And how do you know, wife, whether you'll save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you'll save your wife? And then he goes on and he talks about a lot of other stuff. I wish we could go on. He talks about the unmarried. He talks about changing status. But these are issues that are coming up, as he's planting churches in the Gentile world. And these will become the things, these will become the scriptures. These become the the mandates that guide the church through all of the centuries. And it's starting early here. We're starting early in the New Testament. These things are being set down and understood. Well, they're also taught in the Old Testament, but here you're getting real life situations in the New Testament. So let's move on through Corinthians. There's an awful lot here. Hey, God bless you guys. Love you.